I thought I was walking into the most romantic night of my life, a Valentine's Day proposal I'd dreamed about for years. Instead, I walked into a public execution of my heart, orchestrated by the man I loved, designed to shatter me in front of a horrified crowd. Terry and we were together for almost 3 years. We met at a concert, just clicked instantly, like we were meant to be. Last October, for my birthday, he took me to my favorite restaurant. He gave me this beautiful bracelet, one I'd pointed out months earlier, just in passing. The fact that he remembered, that he paid attention to something so small, it touched me so deeply. That night, he even started talking about taking our relationship to the next level, and my heart just soared. Then November came, Thanksgiving with his family. His mom pulled me aside, telling me how genuinely happy she was that Terry had found someone who balanced him so well. And his brother, Joel, he gave me this meaningful wink, mentioning Terry had been asking about family heirlooms. I try not to overthink it, try to manage my expectations, but honestly, hope bloomed in my chest like a spring flower. December was a whirlwind of holiday parties and end-of-year work. Terry seemed stressed, but then he'd suddenly get this mysteriously cheerful, secretive look. When I'd ask what he was smiling about, he'd just say, "Oh, just thinking about the future." Of course, I assumed he was planning something incredible for the holidays, something for us. At his office Christmas party, he introduced me to all his colleagues with his arm wrapped proudly around me all evening. His friend even mentioned how Terry talked about me constantly at work. Everything, and I mean everything, pointed to a man head over heels in love, probably getting ready to take that huge, significant step forward. January brought a tiny blip, a minor argument about a weekend trip with his college friends he'd forgotten to mention until the last minute. I was bummed about our canceled plans, but I understood the importance of friendship. He apologized so sincerely, promised to make it up to me. And he did. After that weekend, Terry was incredibly attentive. He suggested Valentine's Day dinner at Benny's, this super upscale downtown restaurant that you needed reservations for months in advance. Somehow, he'd secured a table. He asked me to wear the red dress he loved, said he wanted the evening to be special. I was so touched by his effort, by his romantic gesture. 2 days before Valentine's, Terry texted me about a big surprise he'd been planning. My friends, of course, were all speculating it was a proposal. I tried to keep my feet on the ground, but how could I? The fancy restaurant, his recent secretiveness, those little hints from his family. It all screamed he's going to propose. Valentine's Day finally arrived. Terry suggested we meet at the restaurant, explaining he might need to work late but didn't want to delay our reservation. I agreed, buzzing with excitement, my stomach tied in knots with nervous anticipation. I got to Benny's 15 minutes early. The hostess led me to this prominent center table, surrounded by other couples, all bathed in soft romantic light. Terry arrived right on time, ordered champagne immediately. He seemed so nervous, so excited. Throughout dinner, our conversation flowed, reminiscing about our relationship, sharing our future dreams. Everything felt absolutely perfect. Then, after our main course, Terry became visibly anxious, discreetly checking his pocket. My heart rate picked up. A nearby couple got engaged, and applause erupted through the restaurant. Terry watched them with this strange, intense look, then took a deep breath. My pulse quickened, racing now. This was it. When dessert arrived, Terry suddenly stood up. "Everyone," he announced loudly, his voice echoing in the suddenly quieter room. "I have something important to say." He got down on one knee beside me. The hushed conversations died completely. Phones came out, poised to record what everyone, including me, assumed was the proposal. The waitstaff paused, smiling expectantly. Someone nearby whispered, "Oh my God, he's proposing." Terry took my hand. He looked straight into my eyes, and he said, his voice clear and chilling, "I'm done pretending you're worth loving. You're disgusting." The restaurant went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Terry stood up, grabbed his coat, and continued, "I've wasted 3 years trying to fix you. I'm done." And then he just walked out, left me there. A waiter approached, not with a congratulatory smile, but with our bill. $347. I left that restaurant in a daze, completely unable to process what had just happened. My mind was reeling. When I got home, it was empty. Terry had cleared all his belongings from our apartment. Every single one. All my calls went straight to voicemail. His social media? Blocked. Everywhere. 2 days later, his brother Joel called, sounding awkward and genuinely shocked. He told me Terry had been seeing someone named Rita for months. The Valentine surprise? It wasn't a proposal. It was his grand, dramatic exit. Joel swore he had no idea his brother was capable of such cruelty. But the nightmare was just beginning. Within a week, videos of my humiliation, his public performance, were all over the internet. Terry had somehow arranged for someone to record the moment, ensuring maximum public exposure. In his social circles, he was already rewriting our history, painting me as controlling and manipulative, claiming his public display was justified retaliation. He truly thought he had destroyed me, that I'd crawl into a hole and disappear forever. He had absolutely no idea what was coming for him. That first update I posted, I never expected it to explode the way it did. Thousands of comments. My inbox was absolutely obliterated, and apparently my story was everywhere else online too. So many of you asked for updates, and honestly, writing this out, it's been helping me process everything. The last few weeks? Absolute hell. But I'm starting to see things clearer now, and what I'm seeing is making me furious. After that nightmare, I walked home in a daze, still wearing that stupid red dress I'd bought specially. My phone was blowing up with texts from friends who'd already seen the videos online. I just turned it off. Couldn't deal. When I got to our apartment, Terry had already cleared out his stuff. That's when it hit me. This wasn't some spontaneous, cruel moment. This man had planned the whole thing. He knew I'd be too devastated to come straight home, giving him all the time he needed to move out without confrontation. I sat on the kitchen floor until 3 in the morning, just staring at nothing. When I finally checked my phone, I had hundreds of messages. One of the videos had gone completely viral. Even my boss texted, asking if I needed time off. My sister, Darlene, she came over with wine and ice cream. A true angel. I was still in shock, but something wasn't adding up. Terry didn't have much money saved. How did he afford to move out so quickly? Where is he even staying? 3 days after Valentine's Day, my dad called. He sounded weird, asking if Terry and I were having money troubles. Apparently, Terry had just withdrawn $5,000 from a business account, the small coffee shop my parents had helped him open last year. And that's when the real bomb dropped. See, what I hadn't mentioned before is that my parents absolutely adored Terry. They aren't super wealthy, but they're comfortable enough. When Terry started talking about wanting to open his own place 2 years ago, they invested in him, seeing him as family already, their future son-in-law. They paid for the lease deposit, all the equipment, initial inventory, everything. They even hired him a business consultant to help get things running. Dad had assumed the $5,000 withdrawal was for our engagement, maybe an expensive ring or a trip. But with everything that had happened, he was confused and deeply concerned. I had to tell him everything. The silence on the phone was deafening. Then Dad just said, very quietly, "We're coming over now." My parents arrived at my apartment an hour later. I've never seen my dad so angry, and Mom was just devastated. They sat at my kitchen table while I showed them the viral videos of my humiliation. Mom kept saying she couldn't understand. They'd just had dinner with Terry and me 2 weeks ago, and he'd pulled Dad aside to ask for advice about the future. That's when Mom revealed something that made my blood run absolutely cold. They hadn't just helped with the coffee shop. They'd been paying Terry's student loans for the past year. They'd covered the down payment on his car. They'd even paid for his parents to fly in last Christmas because Terry claimed they couldn't afford the tickets. All of it because they thought he was going to be family. Dad pulled out his laptop and started going through bank statements. The more he looked, the worse it got. Large withdrawals Terry had explained away as business expenses or inventory. A second business credit card we knew nothing about. Mysterious payments to accounts we couldn't identify. Mom was crying by now, not just because of the money, but the sheer, agonizing betrayal. She kept saying, "He sat at our table every Sunday. He called me Mom. How did he do this?" I was in shock all over again. Terry hadn't just betrayed and humiliated me. He'd been actively scamming my family for years, using their generosity and trust to fund God knows what or who. By the way, if you're still with me, make sure to hit subscribe. More unbelievable stories are coming. That night, Joel called again. Terry's brother. He sounded awkward, like he didn't want to tell me something. I put him on speaker so my parents could hear. Joel confessed that Terry had actually been seeing Rita for almost a year, not just a few months like he'd initially said. Worse, Terry had been taking her on expensive trips, buying her lavish gifts, even put a down payment on a condo they were now living in together. My mom interrupted, her voice sharp. What condo? Where? Joel gave us the address. It was in the expensive part of town, a new development where units started at $400,000. Dad's face went white. We helped him with that down payment. He said it was for a business expansion. Later that night, after my parents left, I went through old photos on my phone. Holiday gifts Terry had given me that had seemed weirdly expensive on his supposed income. The watch last Christmas, the bracelet on my birthday, the weekend trips that were always mysteriously comped or won in a contest at work. It was all my parents' money. Every single bit of it. The next morning, Dad called. He'd been up all night going through financial records. Terry had embezzled at least $75,000 from the coffee shop and various loans my parents had given him. Dad had already contacted his lawyer, but legal action would take time. It wouldn't address the public humiliation, the emotional devastation he'd caused. That's when I decided, if Terry wanted to play dirty, I could play dirtier. I called Joel back. He was still feeling incredibly guilty about his brother's behavior, still offering to help. I asked if Terry and Rita were happy in their new place. He hesitated, then admitted Terry was stressed about money lately. Apparently, the down payment had wiped out his savings, and the monthly mortgage was more than he'd expected. Interesting. I also learned that Terry hadn't told Rita about the source of his money. She thought he was some financial wizard who'd saved and invested brilliantly. She had no idea my parents had funded their entire relationship. Dad's lawyer advised us to move cautiously. We couldn't just storm the coffee shop and change the locks. There were legal procedures, but we could start the process of auditing the business, freezing accounts, and documenting the fraud. Meanwhile, I had my own plan brewing. Terry texted me a week after Valentine's Day. Need to get some paperwork from the apartment. When can I come by? I didn't respond for 2 days. Then, Saturday, 3 p.m., don't be late. I spent those 2 days preparing. I invited my parents over, set up a small camera in the living room bookshelf. Totally legal in my state as long as it's my residence and I'm present. Saturday came. Terry knocked precisely at 3. When I opened the door, his smug expression faltered, seeing me put together, calm, collected. But what really shocked him was seeing my parents sitting on the couch. He tried to back out. I can come back another time. But Dad was already up, blocking the exit. Terry had no choice but to come in. The tension was suffocating. Terry stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, looking between us. Mom couldn't even look at him. Dad was eerily calm. I spoke first. So, Terry, found what you were looking for at Benny's. He had the nerve to look annoyed. Look, I know you're upset, but it was better to make a clean break. Our relationship wasn't working. Mom cut him off, her voice trembling with restrained anger. Was our relationship working, Terry? All those Sunday dinners? All those Mom and Dad? I'm so grateful for your support conversations. Terry went pale. He glanced at Dad, who was just watching him, expressionless. Terry tried to recover. Listen, I appreciate everything you've done for me, but things with your daughter just weren't. Dad interrupted quietly, his voice like ice. We know about the money. Terry's face. God, I wish you could have seen it. Pure, unadulterated panic. He started babbling about business expenses, how he could explain everything, how he'd been planning to pay it all back. Dad just held up his hand. Save the receipts, son. All of them. The trips, the gifts, the mysterious inventory purchases. We know about Rita, too. Terry switched tactics instantly, suddenly apologetic, his eyes welling up with what looked like fake tears. He claimed Rita was a mistake, that he'd been confused, that the pressure of the business and our relationship had made him act irrationally. I laughed out loud. That's not what your TikTok says. finally living my truth with the woman I was meant to be with. Remember posting that the day after you humiliated me. Terry looked trapped, caught between his mountain of lies. He asked what we wanted. Dad laid it out simply. Every penny back, plus interest. A signed confession of financial fraud. Keys to the coffee shop. And a public apology for what he did to me. Terry sneered. Or what? Dad smiled thinly. Or we pressed charges for fraud, embezzlement, and misappropriation of funds. With the evidence we have, you're looking at felony charges. Terry, good luck keeping your condo with a criminal record. Good luck keeping any job. Terry scoffed, called us bluffing, said we'd never go through with it because it would embarrass us publicly. I stepped closer to him. Terry, you already embarrassed me publicly. What do I have to lose? He left shaken, saying he needed to think about it and would get back to us. Dad's lawyer called him the next day. Terry had 1 week to respond before we filed charges. Meanwhile, I had my own plan working. Remember Joel? He'd been incredibly helpful. He introduced me to his mom, who was absolutely horrified by what Terry did. She invited me for coffee, apologized profusely, and shared some very interesting family photos, including several of Terry and Rita together from months ago at family functions I supposedly couldn't attend due to work. I also discovered something through social media. Rita's best friend, Sandy, works at the real estate office that sold Terry the condo. Sandy had posted congrats on Rita's Instagram about finally getting your dream home. I reached out to Sandy, woman to woman, and share my story. Turns out, Sandy had no idea about me or how Terry had actually funded that down payment. She was disgusted and worried for her friend. Terry thinks he's won. He thinks he's gotten away with humiliating me and scamming my family. He's playing house with Rita in a condo my parents helped pay for, running a business my parents built, wearing clothes, and driving a car funded by my family's generosity. But his perfect new life is built on quicksand, and the tide is coming in. It's been 3 weeks since Valentine's Day. Today, Terry's Instagram showed him and Rita celebrating their new chapter at some expensive restaurant. Dad's lawyer tells us Terry hasn't responded to any communications. The deadline is tomorrow. What Terry doesn't know is that Joel has arranged a family dinner this weekend. Terry's parents, Joel, Terry, and Rita will all be there. And so will a folder full of financial records showing exactly how Terry funded his relationship with Rita. And maybe, just maybe, I'll be making an appearance too. I'll update again after the weekend. Thanks for all the support, Reddit. Knowing I'm not crazy for wanting justice helps more than you know. All right, guys, my notifications are still blowing up. For everyone asking if I'm okay, I'm surviving. Some days are better than others, but knowing Terry is about to face consequences, that's what's keeping me going. So, the family dinner happened, and it was intense. Grab your popcorn because this is going to be a wild ride. Joel picked me up Saturday evening. He was nervous as hell, kept checking his phone. Apparently, Terry had been texting him all day, suspicious about why their parents were so insistent on this dinner. Joel showed me the texts. Terry asking if Joel had said anything stupid to their parents. The audacity of this man, seriously. The plan was for me to wait nearby until Joel texted me to come in. My parents were on standby, too. We weren't sure if we'd need them, but they were ready. Dad had compiled a folder with all the financial records showing Terry's fraud. We'd made copies for everyone, including Rita. Joel and I arrived at his parents' house about 30 minutes before Terry and Rita were expected. His mom hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. She kept apologizing, saying she'd raised him better than this, how ashamed she was. His dad just looked defeated, sitting in his armchair, staring at nothing. They'd already seen the financial records Joel had shown him earlier that week. Finding out their son was not just a cheater, but a thief was destroying them. Joel's mom had prepared this elaborate dinner, all Terry's favorites. When I asked why, she just said quietly that it might be the last meal she'd cooked for her son for a long time. That hit me hard. In all my anger and planning, I hadn't fully considered how this would devastate Terry's family, too. I went to wait in Joel's old bedroom. From there, I could hear when Terry and Rita arrived. Their voices drifted up the stairs. Terry sounding annoyed about the last-minute dinner invitation. Rita trying to be polite and cheerful with his parents. The first 20 minutes were apparently normal, just casual conversation over drinks before dinner. Joel had hidden his phone under a napkin on the table, so I could hear everything. Terry was bragging about how well the coffee shop was doing, how they were thinking about opening a second location. The nerve of him. Then Joel's dad cleared his throat and said they needed to discuss something important before dinner. Terry immediately got defensive, asking what was going on and why everyone was acting weird. Joel texted me. Now, I walked down those stairs feeling like I was in a dream. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. When I stepped into the dining room, the look on Terry's face. God, I wish I had a picture. Pure shock, then panic, then anger. Rita looked confused, glancing between Terry and me. She was prettier in person than in photos. Tall, dark hair. She asked Terry who I was, though I'm pretty sure she knew exactly who I was. Terry jumped up, knocking over his wine glass. He demanded to know what the hell I was doing there. Joel stood up, too, told Terry to sit down and listen. Terry refused, started yelling at his parents that this was a setup, that they were choosing me over their own son. His mom started crying. His dad slammed his hand on the table and told Terry to sit down and shut up. I'd never heard his dad raise his voice before. None of them had, judging by their shocked faces. In the silence that followed, I placed the folders on the table, one in front of each person, including Rita. Very calmly, I explained what they contained, detailed records of every penny Terry had stolen from my parents over the past 3 years. The coffee shop investment, the business loans, the personal loans, his car payment, his student loans, the condo down payment. Rita's face, as she flipped through her copy, was a study in dawning horror. She looked at Terry, then back at the documents, then at me. Terry tried to grab the folder from her, but she pulled away, continuing to read. Terry went into full damage control mode. Claimed I was making it all up, that I was a psycho ex trying to ruin his life because he dumped me. Said my parents had gifted him the money, that there was no expectation of repayment, that they'd practically forced their help on him. That's when Joel played the recording, the one we'd made in my apartment a week earlier, where Terry had basically admitted to the fraud and tried to justify it. Terry's face went white. Rita finally spoke. She asked Terry if it was true. Had he really used my parents' money to buy her gifts, to take her on trips, to put a down payment on their condo? Terry tried to spin it, said he'd been planning to pay everything back, that it wasn't a big deal, that all businesses use investor money. Rita's eyes filled with tears. She turned to me and asked if I knew about her all along. I told her the truth, that I'd only found out after Valentine's Day, that I'd had no idea Terry was cheating, much less stealing. She took off the diamond bracelet she was wearing, the one Terry had given her for Christ. Moss. She looked at it like it was poisonous, then placed it carefully on the table. It was identical to the one he'd given me for my birthday. Guess he couldn't even be original with his stolen gifts. Terry was getting desperate. Started saying that none of us understood the pressure he was under, how hard he'd been working, how he deserved nice things after everything he'd done for my family. His mom asked, "What exactly have you done for my family, Terry?" Terry couldn't answer. That's when Rita dropped another bomb. Apparently, Terry had told her I was his crazy ex who wouldn't let go, that my parents were obsessed with him and kept trying to control his life with their money, that he'd had to publicly break up with me because I was threatening to hurt myself if he left. I literally laughed out loud. Asked her if that made any sense given the Valentine's Day video she'd surely seen. Rita admitted she thought the video seemed weird, but Terry had convinced her it was heavily edited and didn't show how I'd been screaming at him before he finally stood up for himself. The look on her face when she realized she'd been lied to about everything. I almost felt sorry for her. Terry made one last desperate attempt, claimed he and Rita were in love, that yes, he made mistakes, but couldn't we all move forward? He'd pay back the money eventually. He even tried to suggest my parents could invest in his and Rita's future ventures. Rita stood up, very quietly, said she needed some air. She walked out the front door. Terry tried to follow her, but his dad blocked him, said they weren't finished yet. I laid out our terms. Full repayment of all stolen funds, plus interest. A signed confession. Keys to the coffee shop. and a public apology for the Valentine's Day stunt. Terry laughed in my face, said I'd never see a penny, that my parents had been stupid enough to give money to someone who wasn't family, and that was their problem. Then he looked right at me and said the most chilling thing. At least Rita isn't disgusting like you. At least she's worth something. His mother gasped. His father took a step toward him, but Joel held him back. I just stood there, letting the words wash over me. They couldn't hurt me anymore. I'd already been through the worst public humiliation possible. Or a few more cruel words. I smiled at Terry, told him his time was up. Our lawyer had already filed charges that morning. The police would be contacting him soon. The coffee shop accounts were frozen. And once he had a fraud charge on his record, good luck getting another business loan or mortgage. Terry's face twisted with rage. He called me every horrible name you can imagine. Said I'd ruined his life, that he'd make me pay. His parents tried to calm him down, but he was too far gone. That's when Rita walked back in. She'd been standing outside the door, listening to everything. She walked right up at Terry and slapped him hard across the face. Told him she was done, that she wanted him out of the condo by morning, that she'd be contacting her lawyer about removing his name from the deed since he hadn't actually paid for it. Terry turned on her, called her ungrateful, said everything he'd done had been for her. Rita laughed bitterly, asked if humiliating me in public had been for her too, because she'd never asked for that. Never wanted to be with someone capable of such cruelty. Terry stormed out, pushing past all of us. The silence afterward was deafening. Rita sat down heavily, put her head in her hands, asked how she could have been so stupid. Joel's parents just looked shell-shocked. Joel poured everyone a stiff drink. Rita and I ended up talking for hours after that, comparing notes on Terry's lies, the timeline of our overlapping relationships, the red flags we'd both ignored. She wasn't a bad person, just another victim of Terry's manipulation. She genuinely believed I was some psycho ex Terry had needed to escape from. He'd shown her edited texts, made up stories, gaslit her completely. By the end of the night, Rita and I weren't exactly friends, but we had a mutual respect. She promised to cooperate with any legal proceedings against Terry. Said she'd already texted her friend Sandy at the real estate office to look into what it would take to get Terry's name off the condo. The next morning, Sunday, my parents came over. They'd been nervously waiting for updates all night. We were discussing next steps when my phone exploded with notifications. Terry had gone on a social media rampage. Posts on Instagram, Facebook, even Twitter or X now, claiming was trying to extort money from him, that my family was threatening him, that I couldn't accept that he'd found happiness with someone else. He even posted screenshots of supposed texts from me begging him to come back. Completely fabricated, of course. At first, I panicked, but then something unexpected happened. People weren't buying it. The comments were overwhelmingly skeptical. Many pointed out the timing. Why was he suddenly claiming extortion weeks after the viral Valentine's Day video? And then Rita commented on every single post. She laid it all out. How Terry had lied to her about me, used stolen money to fund their relationship, and was now trying to avoid legal consequences for fraud. She ended with, the man I thought I knew doesn't exist. To the woman he humiliated on Valentine's Day, I believe you, and I'm sorry. Terry deleted everything within hours, but the screenshots were already circulating. Monday morning, Terry was served with legal papers at his parents' house, where he'd apparently been sleeping since Rita kicked him out. By afternoon, he was blowing up my phone. The messages started with anger, threats, insults, claims he'd countersue. Then came bargaining. Offers to pay back some of the money if we dropped the charges. Promises to make a public apology if we just gave him another chance with a coffee shop. Finally, around midnight, the desperation set in. Baby, please. I'm sleeping in my car. My parents won't even look at me. Rita's changed the locks. I'll do anything. I never meant to hurt you. This has gone too far. I didn't respond to any of them. Just forwarded everything to our lawyer. Tuesday morning, I went to the coffee shop with my dad and his lawyer. The lawyer had obtained an emergency court order giving us access to the business pending the fraud investigation. We changed the locks, updated the security codes, and began a full inventory. The staff were confused, of course. Dad explained the situation as simply as possible. Terry was no longer involved with the business due to financial irregularities. Most of them seemed unsurprised. One barista, a college kid named Ryan, actually high-fived me. Said Terry had been skimming from the tip jar for months. They'd all suspected, but had no proof. That night, Terry showed up at the coffee shop after closing. Ryan was still there helping us organize paperwork. Terry started pounding on the glass, clearly drunk, demanding to be let in. Ryan called the police while Dad and I filmed everything on our phones. Terry was screaming that we'd stolen his business, that we were ruining his life. When the police arrived, Terry tried to claim he was the rightful owner being locked out of his own business. The officers asked for proof of ownership. Terry couldn't provide any because the business was legally registered to my parents. They ended up escorting him away with a warning about trespassing and public intoxication. Yesterday, I received a letter from Terry, handwritten, tear-stained, 8 pages long, all about how sorry he is, how he's hit rock bottom, how he never appreciated what he had with me, how the Valentine's Day stunt was the biggest mistake of his life. I read it once, then burned it in my kitchen sink. I'm not the same person I was 6 weeks ago. That girl died in that restaurant when Terry got down on one knee and chose public cruelty over basic human decency. The woman I am now doesn't want apologies or explanations. She wants justice, and she's getting it. I'll update again when there's more to share. Thanks for all the support, Reddit. To everyone who's been through something similar, it gets better. Not easier necessarily, but better. I never expected to become some kind of Reddit revenge icon, but here we are. Countless messages, and apparently someone even made a TikTok series about my situation. It's been 4 months since Terry decided to destroy our relationship in the most public, humiliating way possible. For months since he walked out of Benny's, thinking he'd broken me for good. I promised a final update when everything was resolved. So, grab whatever you're drinking because this is a long one. After my last update, things escalated quickly. Terry's desperate texts and calls continued for weeks. He'd alternate between threats. "You'll regret this when I'm done with you," and self-pity. "I'm sleeping in my car. I have nothing left," and fake reconciliation attempts. "Baby, I made a mistake. We can work this out." My parents' lawyer advised us to keep all communication strictly legal from that point forward. We filed for a restraining order after Terry showed up at the coffee shop drunk for the 3rd time. The judge granted it immediately, given the pattern of harassment and the evidence we had. Terry violated that restraining order exactly 4 days later. Ryan, the barista who'd been helping us, called me in a panic because Terry was outside the coffee shop at 6 a.m., clearly hadn't slept, looking like absolute hell. He was screaming about how we'd stolen his business, how we'd turned everyone against him. Ryan had already called the police. By the time I arrived, Terry was in the back of a police car. The officers showed me the body cam footage later. Terry had claimed he was the rightful owner, that we were the ones committing fraud. When they asked for documentation, he couldn't provide any. Then he made the brilliant decision to try to force his way into the shop when they told him to leave. Resisting arrest charges were added to the restraining order violation. Terry spent 3 days in jail before his parents bailed him out. Joel told me their mom had almost refused. She was so ashamed and angry about everything he'd done. But in the end, maternal instinct won out. The conditions of his bail were strict. No contact with me or my family, mandatory counseling, and regular check-ins with a court officer. Rita reached out around this time. She'd been served with a subpoena for the fraud case and wanted to know what to expect. We met for coffee. Not at her shop, obviously. She looked exhausted. Told me Terry had been harassing her, too, showing up at her workplace, sending emails from new accounts after she blocked his number. She filed her own restraining order. 2 weeks later, Terry's lawyer contacted ours. They wanted to make a deal. Terry would plead guilty to lesser charges if we agreed to certain terms, primarily a payment plan rather than immediate full restitution. My parents and I discussed it thoroughly. The lawyer advised that while we had a strong case, trials are unpredictable and can drag on for months or even years. A plea deal would guarantee some justice and let us all move forward. We agreed to the deal with specific conditions. Terry would plead guilty to felony embezzlement and fraud. He would make monthly restitution payments. He would formally relinquish any claim to the coffee shop. And this was my addition. He would make a public apology for the Valentine's Day incident. Terry's lawyer pushed back on the public apology, said it wasn't relevant to the fraud case. I held firm, told my parents I'd rather go to trial than let Terry off the hook for what he'd done to me. That wasn't just about money. It was about deliberately, publicly humiliating someone who loved him. My parents backed me 100%. The negotiations went back and forth for days. Finally, Terry agreed to all conditions. He would plead guilty, make restitution, sign over the business, and make a public apology in the form of a statement that could be shared on social media. The day of Terry's court appearance, I was a nervous wreck. What if the judge rejected the plea deal? What if Terry backed out at the last minute? Darlene came with me for moral support. My parents were there too, sitting with their lawyer. Terry arrived with his parents, but they sat separately. The divide in their family still painfully evident. Joel wasn't there. He texted me that morning saying he couldn't face seeing his brother plead guilty to felony charges, even though he knew Terry deserved the consequences. The judge reviewed the plea agreement carefully, asked Terry if he understood he was admitting to felony fraud and embezzlement, if he understood this would create a permanent criminal record, if he was making this plea voluntarily. Terry answered yes, in a voice so quiet the judge asked him to speak up. When the judge asked Terry to explain in his own words what he had done, Terry tried to minimize it at first. Said there had been financial misunderstandings and unclear boundaries about the money. The judge wasn't having it. Told Terry either he admitted to deliberately defrauding my parents or the plea deal would be rejected and we'd proceed to trial. Terry finally broke. Admitted he had systematically stolen money from my parents under false pretenses. Admitted he had used their investment in the coffee shop to fund his personal expenses. Admitted he had lied about business costs to extract more money. With each admission, his voice got shakier. The judge accepted the plea and reviewed the sentencing terms. 3 years probation, monthly restitution payments, 200 hours of community service, financial counseling, and the special conditions we'd requested, formal relinquishment of any claim to the coffee shop, and a public apology. It was over in less than an hour. Terry was officially a convicted felon. He would never again work in finance or have easy access to business loans. His reputation was destroyed. Any future employer who did a background check would see the fraud conviction. Outside the courthouse, Terry's mom approached me. She looked like she'd aged 10 years. Hugged me tightly and apologized again for her son's actions. Said she and Terry's dad were still processing how their son could have done such terrible things. I felt sorry for her. None of this was her fault. The next day, Terry's lawyer sent over the signed business transfer documents and the public apology statement. The business part was straightforward. Terry relinquished all claims to the coffee shop and acknowledged my parents as the sole owners. The apology was not great. Clearly written by his lawyer, full of vague phrases like regret my actions and acknowledge the hurt caused without actually taking responsibility. I rejected it, told our lawyer to send it back with a note. Either Terry writes a genuine apology that specifically addresses what he did, or we go back to court for violation of the plea agreement. 3 days later, we received a new statement. This one was handwritten, messy with crossouts and ink blots. It was ugly and raw and clearly written by Terry himself. On February 14th, I deliberately humiliated her at Benny's restaurant. I planned in advance, knowing it would cause maximum pain and public embarrassment. I said cruel things that weren't true because I wanted to hurt her. I did this while simultaneously stealing money from her family, who had only ever shown me kindness and support. These actions reflect a profound moral failure on my part. She did nothing to deserve how I treated her. I'm deeply ashamed and sorry for the pain I caused. I read it 10 times. It wasn't poetic or elegant, but it was real. It was the truth. I approved it for release. As agreed, Terry posted it on all his social media accounts. As for the coffee shop, my parents decided to keep it. They hired a proper manager and restructured everything. The staff stayed on, including Ryan. The shop is actually turning a profit now that Terry isn't siphoning money from it. Terry made his first restitution payment last month. It was for the minimum amount allowed under the agreement, of course. At that rate, he'll be paying my parents back for the next 15 years. A monthly reminder of his crimes. I won't be posting any more updates after this. This chapter of my life is closed. Terry will be making restitution payments for years, but I don't need to track them. His felony conviction is permanent. His reputation is destroyed. His actions have defined his future in ways he never anticipated when he got down on one knee. To everyone who supported me through this nightmare, thank you. Your comments and messages help me feel less alone during the darkest moments. To anyone going through something similar, it gets better. Not immediately, not easily, but eventually. As for Terry, I actually ran into his brother Joel yesterday. We've stayed in loose contact since everything happened. He told me Terry's been texting him constantly, asking about me, whether I'm seeing anyone, whether I ever talk about him. Joel says Terry's convinced himself that someday I'll forgive him, that we might even get back together once he's paid his dues. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. Update, since so many people are asking. Yes, the Valentine's Day video is still online despite numerous attempts by Terry to get it taken down. No, I don't watch it anymore. Yes, it still occasionally circulates when someone recognizes Terry at his new job and makes the connection. No, I don't feel bad about that. Actions have consequences. Update 2. Okay, this is wild, but Ryan just texted me that Terry came into the coffee shop today, a violation of his probation, trying to explain himself to the staff. Ryan called the police immediately. Terry left before they arrived, but it was all on security cameras. I've already contacted his probation officer with the footage. Looks like Terry might be facing additional consequences very soon. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. This really is my final update now. Thank you all for the support, the advice, and for reminding me that I deserve better than someone who would deliberately humiliate me for their own selfish purposes. It took a long time, but justice was served. Now, I have to ask you, if you were in my shoes, after everything, what do you think was the most satisfying part of this whole ordeal? Let me know in the comments below.